you're basically just saying is like, well, I'm just going to use ChatGPT, right? If you go to a little more larger company, you see those grassroots coming into like, hey, I used ChatGPT and he helped me to do this. Or we have some data sets that we want to be able to identify and dissect and generate a lot larger models based on this. Let's use ChatGPT. So you see that grassroots coming into place. When it comes to mid to large companies, it starts a little bit kind of raising that gap between what I talk about in change and shift of the C-level executives versus the grassroots, because then you have a culture that might not be really open to innovation, but also you have a culture that is based on policy, of course, depending on what the company corporation is about, where you're not allowed to use ChatGPT because you know that that's open source. So it opens the company in terms of information, or so you want to be cautious about using tools like ChatGPT. That's why this is where it becomes a little bit more is like, well, am I going to look for other type of generative AI?
We're going through something absolutely historic.
Technologies across the board are growing exponentially.
It's a disruption that's going to completely redefine the way businesses compete.
In the next decade, we're going to lose 40% of today's Fortune 500 companies.
The exponential growth of computing is continuing.
AI is nowhere near its full potential.
Whether you like it or not, that the future cannot be stopped by anyone.
Hi there, everybody. This is Mark Verbenkov, and welcome back to the Future Tech and Foresight podcast. We are today returning to one of my favorite topics, that being artificial intelligence and this kind of new world that we're moving into. But today it's going to be a little bit different. So rather than focusing on the technology itself and how it's, say, impacting a specific part of society, we're going to be looking at how it's going to be impacting organizations, and also how organizations are preparing and can prepare for this new AI age that we are moving into. So part of that is how the culture of an organization can prepare itself, or what it can do to get ready to embrace and adopt artificial intelligence. So that's one of the topics under discussion in today's episode. Another point here is, as you know, AI is changing many different aspects of professional work and the professional world. Leaders are also going to have to adapt to this, whether they're business leaders or different various organizational leaders like NGOs, etc. But leaders in general might have to take on a different skill set. So we've obviously talked on the podcast many times before how employees or workers in different organizations, of course, need to take on different skills in order to remain relevant in their employment. But the same thing is true for leaders in these organizations. So we touch a little bit on what are the new skills that leaders are going to need, and specifically how, like, other skills that they're going to need in the future, not just today as the world is being changed by AI, but in the next several years as well. And then we touch on something that I think is really interesting and has come up on the podcast a couple times before, and that's what is coming after chatbots. We do get into kind of AI agents as the next potential revolutionary wave of artificial intelligence, and of course how organizations are going to have to shift and change and get ready for that. So some pretty interesting ideas circling around the idea of organizational change as it relates to artificial intelligence. And today I'm having this conversation with Cyril Arellano, who is an author, speaker, and executive mentor with over 20 years of experience in digital transformation and the role of artificial intelligence in empowering organizations. So drawing from leadership roles at IBM and HP, Cyril combines expertise in leadership, organizational change, and AI to help companies navigate digital transformation. He holds a Bachelor of Science from NYU, advanced AI and leadership certifications from MIT and Harvard, He's also the author of The Golden Triangle, a pinnacle of digital transformation, and the newer book that he has out, Leading in the Age of AI, which explores the intersection of technology, leadership, and innovation, and in large part informs the conversation that we have today. So it's pretty interesting, maybe a little bit of a different type of discussion that we've had on the podcast before, but I think nevertheless quite important as we are moving into this new age of artificial intelligence that will be disrupting and impacting many different aspects of our society. And the organizational culture and how organizations can prepare for this is certainly one of them. So I hope that you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Well, hi there, Serial. Thank you very much for coming on to the podcast today to talk about one of my favorite discussions, and obviously the thing that everybody wants to hear about, artificial intelligence. Of course, we're going to be focusing on a little bit of a different bend or industry, if you want to talk about that. Yeah, thanks for coming on. It's great to have you here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So, obviously, artificial intelligence. But how did you get interested in organizational culture, which is, kind of the bend that we'll be looking at today with relation to AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is very common misconception is that HR and culture and technology kind of are separate. And it's funny because I have been in leadership for almost 25 years, and I've been in high tech. I do have different certifications for AI and leadership. But and actually this came up because I was invited to an HR conference to talk about DEI and AI. And for me to prep for, every time I get invited, I like to pray for it, to prep for the topic, and then say is okay, what am I gonna say about this? And it's the funny thing was that while I was prepping for it, it came up like, well, how does culture take a a role within this digital transformation and AI? And which brought up a really good point for me, which will come in my next book, which is Culture Shift, which it is a lot, involves a lot in the cultural aspect because is the culture of a company is the DNA of that company, right? And depending on the culture that that company has, it has the ability to either grow an innovation or be innovative to bring new technology like AI, or you can actually kill it in terms of AI, right? I've dealt with a lot of companies that are, I have the two type of companies, the companies that want to just acquire AI, bring AI, and a lot of their people are resistant to that because there's not that cultural of innovation, or they're scared of the change. And, when we talk about AI, we're all thinking about Terminator. We're all thinking about RoboCop. I grew up in the 80s. So for me, it's like, it brings it back to machines versus humans. So we have a lot of that within companies that at the end, companies are people, right? But then the part of the culture, which is the DNA of that company, is really essential to see on how AI is going to play a role within that company, and if it's something that is going to let the company grow, or is something that is going to get the company just get delay or stagnant in
Sure, sure. Yeah, or destroyed.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
So you said one thing at the beginning about AI or innovation and DEI. Now, I I I try to keep this as non-political of a podcast as I possibly can. Sometimes my own personal thoughts seep through, but I try not to, and I'm not going to try to do that here. But I
Yeah.
am very curious with something that's connected to that, and if it came up at that conference that you were at, and that's of course, I think it's the most well-known example now, where Google's I know it was Gemini. I can't remember if they changed the name. I use ChatGPT personally all the time.
Mhm.
Um, but like, was that discussed at all with regards to how these AI platforms and tools, of course, have like bias built into them? Like, was that a large discuss? I would assume it would be at a DEI type conference. And again, I'm keeping my own personal thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that is really important because when I came into a conference, my whole idea was, well, they know that I talk about AI. They know that I talk about leadership, but we never talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like that is a very, like you said, nowadays is very politicized. But when you talk about creating, most of it, my audience is executives, C-level executives that are trying to either integrate AI or, as my company, we do create technology, AI technology. We actually have a patent pending for a type of AI integration. But every time I say AI is a tool, right? Is not good or bad. But we as humans, mostly either integrators or creators of those AI tools, we do make decisions to integrate and create AI, sometimes in a way that is biased
Mm.
to our even our own companies, organizations. And I talk in my book a lot about that in terms of having the main point of integrating AI. And I have it here as kind of like my statement. Always say is AI is not here to AI is here to empower humanity and not replace it, which is exactly what we're talking about. Is not only create or integrate technology to replace people or bring AI to replace people, but empower it. Now, when it comes to DEI, we tend to create, and this is a side of AI, we tend to create systems that sometimes are biased,
Mm.
right? Uh, I have a number of clients that are in the HR spectrum or the industry, and when they're looking at resumes, they're looking for different technologies to be able to be more efficient in the sense of, I mean, going through thousands of resumes, it might be a really, really tremendous job, right? Mundane job. So having a technology like AI that can go and look for resumes and look for people within the resumes on skills based on skill sets and all that is great. But when you systematically create a bias or bias in your system when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, this is when it becomes a little bit more of, again, integrating this system or AI. It can become biased certainly your people within your organization. So one of the things that I say is, if you're going to integrate in any part of your organization, if you're going to integrate or are planning to integrate AI,
Mhm.
the most important component is to look at your people component, right? Because you're going to create this empowerment to empower your people instead of replacing it. And of course, I know DEI, like I said, it's a little bit more on the people component, but it does have an element that can systematically, be biased to people if you don't integrate it with the people component in mind.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, it's I've had many guests come on, and we've bias always kind of comes up. And maybe we can touch on it again later on, where I like to focus on like the future of AI and the future
Yeah.
of whatever vertical we're touching on. But yeah, there's some and I get a lot of feedback from the audience about like, well, the negative kind of future apocalyptic kind of perceptive
The
of
utopian and
yeah,
dystopian
utopian
future.
dystopian
Yeah.
where bias gets in and radically, how should I say, reinforces certain biases in an organization. But we can leave that for later.
Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
so you're obviously touching on organizational structures and people within organizations. One of the first questions that I wanted to ask you, because this is also something that I'm confronted by, I guess, with some of my clients, is this idea of resistance to adopting AI initially. And I guess within that question, there's two questions. Like one, if you're dealing with the executive level, I'm assuming that there's maybe less resistance than there would be on the staff level, which, as you properly surmised, people think Terminator, job unemployment, technological unemployment, all these sorts of things. So maybe you could, break down both of those or touch on both of those, like if you see that, or like,
Yeah.
what resistance you're experiencing when you're talking to your clients.
Absolutely. I think as a human beings, regardless of what level or role we play in organizations, we do have a certain resistance to change. That is absolutely a human trait, if you put it this way. Now, what I've encountered though is that the resistance will be different based on what, and touching in a little bit of culture, what is culturally either in your persona or either in your faith, in different aspects of your life, you confront that resistance based on the information that you have. For example, when I coach executives, I do have basically those sides, right? We tend to say that, well, usually at the C level is a little bit more of like egocentric part because, oh, my competitors are using AI, so I need to bring AI. So it's more like AI is a good thing that I know that is gonna help my bottom line. So AI is gonna help me pretty much replace people. So it's gonna be cheaper labor and things like that. I do have other clients that are at C-level executives that they say is like, I'm afraid to integrate AI because I know that I love my people. I love the people in my organization, and I actually have a great client that is like, I don't know what to do because I see that the industry is applying AI, but I don't want to replace anybody. So the part of the information at all levels of the organization is really important because that is what's gonna make or break the resistance within the organization. Now, if I can break that up a little bit more, is resistance to change, and mostly talking about AI integration, comes to two things. One is the fear of losing control, right? Is kind of the well, if you're gonna put okay, you're not gonna replace me, but you're gonna put something there that am I gonna lose control over that? And of course, the second one, probably I listed them differently, but the second one I think is the most important one. But is it AI gonna replace me, right? So usually, different people react to that fear differently. Now, having that being said, in the executive level, one of the things that we do, and that I do in my company, is we have an assessment that we call the AI readiness assessment. And they basically, what we do is that we put a survey, which is like a 10-15 minute survey, and it's kind of like an assessment, but we evaluate people in their readiness for AI between 0 and 5. If they are 3 or over 3, then we're consider them ready for AI. We just need to see what are the kinks and things that they might be hesitant on integrating AI. If they're under 3, though, that means that a lot of people in their leadership team are not ready for AI. So we have to treat that differently because, as I said, if in your leadership team you having problems, not problems, but you're having people that are resistant to that change. If you're trying to push a change, mostly integrating AI, it is going to go sideways. Why? Because you don't have that unity in saying, yeah, let's go through this change. So with them, and in my experience, is of course what I've seen is the older the people, the bias to, or the information towards what AI is. And of course, AI is not new. It's not since ChatGPT came out and here. No, I mean, it's been since the 50s. But the way that we believe AI is, we can take it as very utopian or dystopian, right? So based on the information that they have, I remember looking through some, and by the way, we do this assessment anonymous because we don't want to bring that into the table. Only the leader, the executive knows who responded what. But you will see that even in the leadership, at the leadership level, there are people that are completely like, and even in my social media, sometimes when I was in touring in my books, and sometimes it was like, oh, you're the Antichrist, you're promoting this bad technology. But I'm like, at the leadership level, you will see that there are some peoples that have that resistant even to what AI is because they don't know what AI is. They feel like, oh, it is like Terminator that is going to take over the world, but they do see it as it is going to be harmful for me and the company. So I'm not taking part of that ideology, right? Because they think now that AI is an ideology.
Mm.
So uh, at that level, at the C-level executive, we go through different part of the process where we teach him what is AI. Basically, I sit down with this C-level executives and I kind of go through them and say, this is what AI is and all that. And then we reevaluate if they over three. And I would say so far, and I knock on wood, so far, all the companies that we've onboarded AI, they have gone through that 3 and plus level. So that's at the C level because it is a smaller group than what it is the rest of the company. So just to answer your question on the rest of the company, what we do is we deal mostly with what is culture change. And the book that we're going to be launching this fall, it's called Culture Shift because is for us is to bring that change of innovation to eliminate that resistance in the people is basically just to let your people know that you're going to be empowered by a new technology, automation, AI, and you're not going to be replaced by this new technology. And again, is a little bit different because in what we can probably get more into the book, but uh, the culture shift it starts at the top. And that's the reason why we do these assessments, these readiness assessments at the top, because they're the ones that are going to bring down, we call it, they're the culture shifters. Then your mid management is your culture changers, which are the ones that the agents of change. And then the people within your organization is the culture bearers, right?
Mm.
They're the ones that bear your culture. So if you want to mitigate resistance at the people level, it has to come from the top. So that's basically the way I say. I know it was a huge answer, but
No, so totally
just
fine.
dissecting a little bit of not only the resistance that I've seen, but also to see how to mitigate that resistance based on a very people first approach.
No, that makes total sense. Maybe as a continuation from that, so ChatGPT has come out almost 2 years now, right? We're coming up close to 2 years. I think when I first started talking about AI and generative AI, it was unknown, right? Like I think the first time I got introduced to it was actually on the podcast. I had a futurist come on from England, and that was maybe 4 years ago, something like that. So he was a little bit ahead of the curve. He was explaining
19,
like,
20.
yeah, like here's what Gen AI is, and here's what we can do right now. And it was like, I couldn't fully comprehend it because I hadn't looked into it too much, but nonetheless, it was there. Um, but now generative AI has kind of, taken over, or it's gone through, it's infiltrated, Western and I guess global consciousness. With regards to the resistance that you're seeing in these organizations, is it reducing? Is it increasing? Like, how are the resistors to change changing in their resistance? Have you seen any change? Are your clients saying like, yeah, maybe there's a grassroots movement where like the people are clamoring like, give us AI, give us AI, or is it still
Yeah, so it's kind of the battles of the roles or the yeah, like you said, the grassroots. The companies that I deal with, which are a little bit more like medium and large companies, I also deal with some small businesses. You will see that mostly in small businesses, they're more acceptable to using something like ChatGPT because they see uh, um, I guess they see the solution firsthand. They just to write a, let's say, a proposal for a client as a small business, you're not questioning if that's going to replace you or not. You're basically just saying is like, well, I'm just going to use ChatGPT, right? If you go to a little more larger company, you see those grassroots coming into like, hey, I used ChatGPT and he helped me to do this, or we have some data sets, data models that we want to, be able to identify and dissect and generate a lot larger models based on this. Let's use ChatGPT. So you see that grassroots coming into place. When it comes to mid to large companies, it starts a little bit kind of raising that gap between the what I talk about in change in the shift of the C-level executives versus the grassroots, because then you have a culture that might not be really open to innovation, but also you have a culture that is based on policy, of course, depending on what the company corporation is about, where of course you're not allowed to use ChatGPT because that's open source. So it opens the company in terms of information or priority information, IP information. So you want to be cautious about using tools like ChatGPT. That's why this is where it becomes a little bit more is like, well, am I going to look for other type of generative AI, right? But I think it is, you always see it at the people, and mostly because the workforce, and this is also part of truth, is that they in some companies there's a youth or younger workforce where they're more I mean, they didn't grow up like, they didn't grow up like us fearing Terminator, right?
Sure.
Some of them, they don't even know who Terminator is. And it's so funny because when I go speak, I always start with my Terminator, and some people in the audience know who that is. And then I go all the way to iRobot, and then I go to nowadays is Megan. I think that's another picture that I put there, is like for younger crowds to identify what AI is. But I think going to that is it really gonna depend also in the company. And that's why, going back to why culture is so important in every company, in order to mitigate that resistance, be able to integrate AI in a way, of course, that is empathetical and ethical.
Mhm. So, maybe thinking a little bit further ahead here, and I said I like doing this at the end of the podcast, but I like doing this in general. Um, as I listen to a lot of podcasts of like people in Silicon Valley that are actually building these things, whether it's Elon Musk, Sam Altman, et cetera, and et cetera. Um, as I think the ideas are coming out that ChatGPT, there was a recent model that was released like just a couple days ago, if I'm not mistaken. These tools are getting more and more powerful, right? So I know that we're aware of that. I think there's a general understanding that, oh yeah, these things are getting more powerful. But I think that as these releases come about, and it's actually very clear that these AI tools are getting really powerful really quickly. I think correct me if I'm wrong. I've been busy with deadlines, but I think the new model is like 1.0, and it has the
This
yeah
01.
1. Okay, there we go. And it has the capacity to reason at like a PhD level,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
this is like, for the average person, this is pretty significant. It's like, oh, it was, struggling with sentences a year ago, and now it's at the level like it's in a condensed time frame. So as people are experiencing this, as like, the Elon Musk of this world are speaking about this, do you think that there's going to be maybe a shift again, or is there going to be, as you just explained, is that going to continue? Like, are people going to be more resistant to it? It's like, oh shoot, like, yeah, Serial is saying, it's an augmenting technology now, but who knows in a year, is it actually going to be a unemployment technology? Like I
Yes.
don't know. I think things are moving too quickly and it's hard to wrap our heads around everything. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I always like to say every time there's a new release for AI, not even technology, because now it's kind of like, oh, there's a new thing, and is it technology or is it release, etc. So, but now with O1 is, I, for me, the part is the technology has already been there, right? There is actually something called artificial superintelligence that then, if we have the computing power, we will eventually get there where it can be beyond reasoning. It can start actually even detect the voice, that if you're talking in a voice that might be threatening, or it really can go as far as the future is here now type of stuff, right?
Sure.
Now, it is certain that as everything I say, what I've said before, is that people are now losing jobs to AI. People are losing jobs to people that are using
Yeah,
AI.
yeah.
And we've heard this. It's kind of like it going thrown out there, but it is a reality. But now, as far as the technology goes, and this is what I like to say always, is uh, if we it's kind of, the dog is out of without a leash, right? And this is where it goes really important to our leadership, and can be in the political spectrum, or can be even within the organization. As leaders, we have the responsibility to integrate or create an AI that is really, really going to empower humanity. Because remember, AI doesn't create by itself. Like, even the people yet. Even the people at OpenAI, there's people working on this, right? And I always say that I like to, this is the way I explain it to executives. I know if there's people seeing this that are very technical, my say is like, that's not how it works. But this is how I like to explain it to executives, and say, you have heard of training AI, right? So basically, is the AI is going to do whatever the AI was trained for. Is not going to do anything outside that, because it hasn't been trained. Now, from there, there's another lingo that we say is like, oh, the learning of the AI, right? Is the algorithm is learning what I'm doing. Is like, well, it is learning based on what it was trained for, right? Is like, if I want to let the AI, or the algorithm that we know right now, as the word that we use for that, is like, if the AI hasn't been trained for something that we want to teach the algorithm, is not going to do it. Why? Because it wasn't trained for that. So what what that tells us is that AI is not capable of create something outside of what wasn't trained for. Again, like you said, at least for now. But even if we create an AI that can create things by itself, it was because it was created by someone that trained the AI to do that, right? So it all goes back to the human being, to the leadership, and how leadership, just as weapons, as money, we see it as that it is going to be based on who has the hand of that technology. So that as a premise, it tells us is, okay, if we see it as a future, the way I see it is, in a futuristic, with all these technology that is getting better and better, I would say is, if you have the people component, the human component as a core, and you want to empower humanity, I would say take advantage of the technology to do that. And I'm going to tell you a quick example. Where I grew up, I already grew up in a place that it had electricity. and I grew up in Mexico City, and I remember that my parents used to tell me, well, we had hours without electricity. So, and even I remember sometimes they would tell us like, turn the light off because the electricity is very, very important, right? I didn't have the same pain because what my parents went through because they had electricity wasn't a commodity. It was a need back then. For me, electricity, I knew that I just press a button, I have
Mhm.
light, I have electricity. Well, you and I probably grew up with the dial-up, right?
Yeah.
Dial-up was like, is you have to disconnect your phone and connect it and have internet, right? My kids don't even know what dial-up is. It's already something that they're using the internet. They have it in their phones. Even some years back, when we were going to college or high school, we didn't even have cell phones because it was so expensive to have cell phones. Now our generation have cell phones. They create videos. They post them on the internet. So they don't never suffer lack of electricity. They never suffer lack of internet. But what we have to notice here, the trends, is that technology, it's going to continue. It's not going to stop. AI is going to become more and more and more powerful. And that's what, like I said, is the dog is out of a leash out there. As leaders, is our responsibility to make sure that the dog is in a leash. And what I mean by that is not close the research or make a having in Washington D.C. a group up of people, powerful people, just telling us what to do with it. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that when we integrate or create AI, we always have to be conscious that the creation of AI has to be to empower humanity. Otherwise, we'll see probably not in our lifetime, but we'll probably see some of those dystopian futures that we fear. But it all goes back to leadership.
Right, right. Well then maybe a follow-up on this leadership point, and I think this also connects to the point that you brought up, and I'm so happy that you brought it up because many other guests talk about it, and it's you're not going to be replaced by AI, you're going to be replaced by people who use AI properly. So with those kinds of ideas in mind, right, that and leadership, like I started a business about a year and a half ago now. I talk to CEOs all the time, and there's always discussions about AI and integration, very similar to the work that you're doing. Um, what should these leaders be thinking about? Like, how do they need to upskill? Do they need to start thinking differently? Do they need to, um, I don't know, like take on different ideas in order to manage and navigate this new era that we're moving into? Like, I think we understand about the actual people that are doing the work in organizations, right? They need to use AI because it's going to augment their capabilities, and they're able to do, 3-4 times the amount of work this were before. But what about leadership? Like, that to me sounds a little bit more nebulous, right? It's not as clear cut. It's not as easy to understand as it is somebody just, okay, you're not using ChatGPT, use ChatGPT every day. Start there. What about leadership? What should these guys be thinking about with regards to implementing AI, thinking about AI, thinking about the future, those sorts of ideas?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what leadership is, right? You for me, at least the definition of leadership is someone that influences
Hmm.
somebody, right? Now you can be a good leader or you can be a bad leader. You can influence for good, you can influence for bad. So I think that those traits goes into probably what you hear a lot as well with this artificial intelligence. There is emotional intelligence, which is the soft skills that AI will never have. But I think as leaders, the responsibility that we have is going, and this ties up back to culture, right? Is as leaders, we have the responsibility to, in an era of AI, and just to bring my book again, promote my book, Leading in the Age of AI, is the important and crucial point as a leader is to have those emotional intelligence, soft skills, that it is ethics,
Hmm.
well, ethics is not kind of like emotional intelligence, but is mostly the empathy, the moral empathy and ethical aspect of the as a leader that you can have on not only on your people, but knowing that yes, it is okay to bring this technology. It is perfectly okay to increase your bottom line. It is perfectly okay. We're working in a project right now. I'm not gonna mention too much the details, but in this project, we are integrating AI that it will take the people that we're doing this for. With a push of a button, they probably can save between 8 to 10 hours.
Right.
When I say that is like we're not replacing them, but what we creating is this room for them to, instead of being so stressed about doing the work that they need to do that takes them between 8 to 10 hours, to now a push of a button is kind of like marketing stuff, but
Sure.
it takes minutes to do what they would do in hours. I think that's where you start reflecting as a leader. Okay, are you doing this because really you want to have your people empowered to be more creative, more open, have an innovation culture? Or are you doing this because you want to replace them and gain in your bottom line and bring more money for your stakeholders? So I think going back to that is the role of a leader is see for the people that they're leading, uh, but also in a way that is I and in my website is all over the place. Is we have a people first approach. I know a lot of competitors, a lot of people use the digital first approach, which is like, hey, bring technology.
Mm.
For us, we're more into like people first approach. Like if you're gonna do something about it, start with your people. Don't start with, oh, what can I replace this people with, is basically is okay, well, how can you empower them? And I think for me that is the role of a leader within all these in the digital in the AI age.
Right, right. Well, I think that makes sense. And especially if this kind of mindset gets propagated throughout, businesses across the world, then I think this, if we want to brand it like the Terminator thought, would decrease because if you're focused on upskilling your workforce, if you're focused on, making the message or giving the message that this is an augmenting force and not a replacing force, then there's going to be less resistance to taking up your tech or taking up the AI that you're bringing in, and then your business can grow. I worked in Barcelona for several years before coming back to Canada, and one of the things that one of the projects that I was managing was about introducing something called collaborative robots
Mm.
to different industrial, like manufacturing and food processing. And one of the funny or sad, how depending on how you look at it, things was, okay, we're bringing these expensive robots. They're not that expensive, but still reasonably expensive, to like a manufacturing line, and we would hear from like the middle management or the upper management. It's like, okay, like this is going to save us hours. It's going to save us, however many thousands of dollars, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. Um, but our employees, like the people at the bottom of the organization, they're not using it, and they're just, they break it, or they like, oh, the power's out, so, and so they just took the power out of it. So if you don't have, to your point, if you don't have the culture there, you can force feed technology as much as you want, but if people aren't going to use it, it doesn't matter, and you're essentially wasting your time,
Yes.
your effort, and a bunch of money trying to bring the stuff in. So I think your perspective is on point, shall we say? You have to shift culture, and then from there, innovation can flow.
Yeah, absolutely. Just want to touch on that a little bit. I have there's an example. I have a couple of, I usually say we have two type of clients. We have the ones that I pretty much been speaking about all during this time. But then we have the other ones that are the part of, I hate that to say egocentric, but is like, oh, my competition is using AI, so I'm gonna bring AI. And what happens in that part is that we start with technology. My first book, actually, it's called The Golden Triangle because it uses the PPT framework: people, process, technology. And I always say is the ones that acquire the technology first, they start with the third part of the triangle, which is technology. They try to recreate the processes, but at the end, and then they try to retrain the people based on what this new processes and this new technology does. So one, which is great in the sense of like I still get higher for looking at the change management component of it. But one of the things that I always say is if you start with technology, then processes, and then people, that part of the equation is never going to be good. Why? Because your people are always going to be resistant because you never made them part of that process. Um, so and it is costly. I always say it's like a leak in your house. Once you have a leak in your house, you don't just buy buckets and buckets and then bring a golden bucket and put it under your leak. You go into the root of that leak. Sometimes when organizations go and buy this technology, I have different cases that I could tell you is like they bought hundreds and hundreds of technology, but then nowadays spending other hundreds and hundreds of dollars in trying to change management and train their people that are already. I actually got a friend of mine that says like, "Oh, I went to train them on a new software." And right as soon as I got there, someone asked me, "Is like, oh, you're the one that's coming to replace me."
Hmm.
It's like that is because it wasn't done. It wasn't done in not in the right way, but it went into a technology first
Mm.
or digital first rather than a people first component. And it is true. It happens.
Yeah.
And it's most costly.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. I haven't thought about change management for a while as a startup. You're focused on too many other things. So no, this is good to
I
hear.
know.
Um, should we move to kind of the future a little bit? I mean, we've touched on it a
Absolutely.
little bit, but kind of like for the last bit of the podcast, I love focusing on this. Um, like, is change management going to shift, or I guess I should say, how is it going to shift? With, of course, this age of AI and focusing on this perspective. And again, as these tools, these platforms, these you know, software, chatbots, whatever you want to call it, get profoundly more powerful and competent and effective. Not even in the next 10 years. I mean, that's way too far ahead. In the next 3 years, right? If we've seen all these changes just with ChatGPT in 2 years, under 2 years, 3 years out, I think it's going to be pretty significant. So, like, how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so I don't think change management is gonna have any play like a different play
Okay.
in this. I do see, and not because I will be promoting my book Culture Shift pretty soon, but change my mind. So this is the way I see it, and knowing, and I've used before, like the ProSci and car. I'm not promoting whatsoever any type of process on change management process,
Mhm.
but the way I see it is that a change management is mostly to facilitate what something has already happened. Give you an example.
Gotcha.
You brought a new software. You brought a new AI part. Well, now let's have the change management team come and make it facilitate that throughout the company, right? Going through the change management process. For me, that's already too late. And the reason why I say culture shift, which is the process that we use to bring that change management, is that culture shift is a framework that uses at a broader level. So culture shift for us is before you go into change management. And I'm not saying that the culture shift the people or organizations have to use it, because I know change management is more kind of the process out there to make this type of changes. But if we see it in this example for example, if we see it in this way, that change management is very tactical, very practical, right? Is we already have the software, let's train the people and let's make some shifts and make sure that everybody knows how to do it. When you do a culture shift, you're using a framework with the whole companies involved in a culture change, uh, which means is not only the people affected, but also it is you're injecting a culture that it will be for innovation. Going back to the framework that I mentioned, the upper management, the mid management, the people. Now that's where I see, and not only because I'm promoting a culture shift, but I do see organizations going towards that. Change management is always going to be there as a tactical, practical thing. Culture shift is what needs to happen nowadays because the company, like you said, even next year is going to be new. Oh, oh, one is coming up like hot in us with reasoning AI. And you're like, how do we even make sense of this? Right. So by having it change again, if you see it in a change management lens, is like, well, how do we make aware of this change? How do we make knowledge of this change? How do no is you need to have already a DNA within your company that know how to deal with these nuisance in technology. You already need to have a culture of that innovation, flexibility, and adaptability to know how to deal with these changes in technology, either if they're coming in months, in years now. And I think that for me, the future will be is if a company is ready culturally to make strides on innovation and be agile in making those changes, is a company that is going to survive.
Mm.
If this culture doesn't change and all you're doing is putting band-aids with change management here and there, every time you change something, you have to bring the SWAT team of change management to make that change happen. The company is not going to be able to and we have to remember that the culture is not only towards inside within our organization, is also outside. It affects our community. It affects our clients. It affects, even influences politics. So culture is very, very important. And I think that will be kind of the shift of change management in the future.
Okay. Okay. Great. Um, Connected to this, and I think maybe this might be a little bit more tangible as well. I've been hearing lately that the kind of the next, I don't know if you want to call it a phase, but the next iteration of these chatbots and generative AI type technologies are going to be agents. I think most recently it was Jensen Huang who talked about this on it was either a panel discussion or an interview, and he was saying, within the next like 1 to 3 years, agents are going to be some of the how should I say, the more utilized AI tools
Mhm.
out there. So, and sorry, I was thinking about this while you were saying it's a difficult question to phrase. If if leadership is about inspiring people, I think management obviously about managing people, but what happens when you have the people on the lowest rung of the organization, their job now is to maybe manage agents rather than doing the specific work, right? So we've talked about like upskilling and the need to take on obviously new skills as technologies and organizations change. Sorry, it's not a properly formatted question, but
Right.
hopefully you understand what I'm saying, right? As these AI agents come in, it's going to radically change how people do work, and how should people be thinking about that if this is coming about in 24 months or some or less.
Yeah, I think if what I understand is basically we're putting people to in charge of technology like agents
I
instead
think
of being
so.
the
I think that's
ones
what's
that
happening. Yeah.
are the agents. And it's really it's it's funny if I say that. It's not funny, but it's funny in the sense of like we are going through the Industrial Revolution 5, right? Which is now we're talking about beyond Internet of Things, beyond now we're using is the AI and robotics and all that. And I always get that with chatbots and agents. We're actually in my company, we're creating something that it's called artificial intelligence voice assistant, which is basically a 24/7 uh, uh, receptionist, if you may, but is basically to give a break sometimes. The overload of or receptionists sometimes that they handle hundreds of calls. Um, so when it comes to having humans kind of now instead of you doing the work, managing the work for others, I think is as long as you're not replacing people, but you are actually bringing people to make sense of the AI. I'm going to give you an example. Probably is not going to answer exactly what you asked, but um, there is a significant not problem, but challenge in when it comes to like I'm just going to bring an industry. The medical
Mm.
industry, right? If you call, probably not in Canada, but in the US, you get a lot of like, if you want to call your doctor, you got to go through mountains and for at least someone to answer your call, and then having someone to basically just a human answering your call. And when that person answers your call, the person is so frustrated, unfortunately, that you get a really bad customer service. So, and again, that's not because of the person is bad or the person is it wants to be mean to you. Is because they're handling hundreds and hundreds of calls a day, and the people are frustrated on the phone because it's like it's inhumanly to be able to answer so many calls. So what we started to do is creating and train this AI agent. We call it Ava, which is the AI voice assistant or virtual assistant per se. So what we are doing with this is instead of replacing the receptionist, we are giving the receptionist the value that they are for. Like you hire a receptionist, well, actually, they're not receptionists. You hire the person because you need help around the medical clinic, the everything, but you have to be also answering calls. That's not your job, or that's not your full-time job, your main job, but unfortunately, it is your job because patients are calling. Now, by putting Ava in place, what we're doing is we're bringing the empathy of these people into the AI. So when you call Ava and say, Ava, and it's so funny because now we're being asking tough questions, but it's like, hi, this is Ava. This is artificial intelligence voice assistant. How can I help you? And then you say, well, I want to see Dr. John. Oh, perfect. I want to have an appointment with Dr. John. And Ava says, okay, let me see. When do you want to come in? And it starts making these questions. The things that now, instead of one at a time, we can handle hundreds of calls at the same time.
Right.
But who's training that AI? The same person that gets those calls. Why is so important to have the person that handles those calls in the AI? Is because we want to keep the same empathy, the same type of service. And one of the things that I usually do is that if you go to Yelp and look at a doctor, sometimes the reviews you have like thousands of reviews with 3, 2, 1 reviews, and it says the doctor is phenomenal, but the office staff is awful. Well, again, I'm not saying that they're awful, but it's because the frustration of so many things that are happening at the same time. So by taking that out of their hands and for them being able to worry more, not worry, but work on what they were hired for, you're bringing these agents or artificial agents to do the work that the same work, but even in with the same training to more people. So three things happen. Your staff is more happy. Why? Because they're not overwhelmed with all these calls. Second, your patients are happy because now someone, even if it's an AI, they rather talk to an AI than a voice that says, "My name is," press 1, press 2. The joke that I was gonna say is like I was calling our AI and I was saying is like, "Oh, I'm in too much pain," and the AI responded is like, "Well, if you need to call 911, hang up and call 911 immediately," and then he said, "Hope you feel better." Like the, things like that minimum is like is now we are creating technology with empathy, but because is trained by the same staff that we're using. So I don't know if that responded to your question, but
Perfect.
it's sometimes is yes, we have to have the people. I think in the first place, it is good to bring these people to train this type of AI because that includes them within the process. But second is the AI again is trained by someone, right?
Yeah.
That knows the work and the job, and it'll be better to have that person train that. I don't know if the CEO or the doctor will be able to train the AI the way this
Yeah.
person trains it. So I don't, if it's a good thing, is it a bad thing?
Yeah.
I don't know, but I think again going with the empowering the human first. I think that's where that's how I see it.
Yeah.
I know some people would say, "Well, you're replacing the receptionist." Like, no, really, we just adding more.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great answer. I'm always reminded of maybe 7, 10 years ago or something like that. The idea was learn to code, become a programmer because that's the future. And now it seems to be, well, obviously that has shifted. I mean, there's still a future for them, but it seems to be, if I can piece together multiple podcasts that I've been having and listening to, it seems to be the future as well. We are going to start to train AI systems or agents. So the skills of empathy, the skills of human interaction, those soft skills are going to become much more interesting and relevant. And therefore, maybe leaders should be thinking about that in the next couple of years anyways. Cyril, I think this is a great place to stop. I see we're also, obviously a little bit over time. And I don't want to take up more of your time. I'll have your website up on the and your LinkedIn up on the show notes. Are there any other places where you want people to reach out and follow what you're up to?
Yeah, no, just surrealarellano.com. That's my website, and of course, if they want to chat with me, there's like availability button there, and I will be happy to chat with anybody. Again, like I said, is people first. So either if you're a C-level executive or someone that manage people, or even within your organization, there's a person that says like, well, how do I keep my leadership accountable? I'm open for any type of conversation.
Perfect. Well, great. Thank you very much for the interesting discussion. Really appreciate it, and your insights and your time. Glad to have you on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark.
Well, thanks for listening to this week's Future Tech and Foresight podcast. If you like what you've heard here, there are, of course, a number of ways that you can support the podcast. The best way would be to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or give a rating on Spotify, which you can find a step-by-step explanation for on the futuretechandforesight.com website. Alternatively, feel free to leave a comment either on the episode show notes or the YouTube channel where you can see video recordings of the interviews. And finally, if you are part of an organization that is aware of the disruptive and transformational impact that emerging and future technologies will bring and want to know more, please get in touch to hear about the strategic foresight services that we offer and how we can help future-proof your organization and take advantage of the phenomenal opportunities available to survive and thrive in the future.
A lot of future-shocked people and future-shocked institutions in our society are simply overwhelmed.
Once there is superintelligence, The fate of humanity may depend on what the superintelligence does.
Science fact is catching up to science fiction.
The first truly intelligent machine will be the last invention that humanity needs to make.
The only scarcity that will exist in the future is that which we decide to create ourselves as humans.
Within a 10-year design revolution, we can have all humanity living the highest standard living anybody's ever known.
Progress is accelerating at an exponential pace, and it's going to reach a point where progress is so fast it's going to be a singularity.
We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens.
Every single headline points to the birth pangs of a Type 1 civilization.